Good morning, everybody. 10:30 on a beautiful Saturday morning. I want to welcome you all to our HartmanBaldwin's construction showcase on this beautiful, so I hope it's beautiful where you are and beautiful Saturday morning. It's certainly beautiful where I am. And hopefully you guys all have a chance to have a little leisurely Saturday morning and grabbed your favorite morning beverage, a cup of coffee, cup of tea, or whatever it may be, and can sit down and spend the next 45 minutes to an hour with us learning a little bit about residential remodeling and HartmanBaldwin and how we do all of this. Okay, I think we're good to get started. Again, welcome to our construction showcase. A little bit about what we're going to be doing today. I thought it'd be fun since HartmanBaldwin, we've been doing residential remodeling for a little bit over 35 years now, and have really worked on a design build process that we believe works well. Well, we know it works well because we have lots of projects to show for that. And this particular one is one that that I'd like to share with you and talk a little bit about how we did this. So what we're going to do today is, in a lot of ways, look at the project that you're seeing here as a case study and walk you through how we met each other, how we did this project, and use the process to kind of step by step how we got from the beginning to end on this project. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is that this process that we use results in so many great projects. And the interesting thing is, for me, is, next slide, please. When I walk into a home like this is the home that you just saw, we want to start to talk about how do we get from where we are to what we want, where when we see something like this, how do we get to, next slide, this. The fun thing about these two photos is they're both taken about from the same angle. If you look at the gray couch in this slide, you could go back to the next slide, please, and see this is taken from the same angle, and you can see such a difference. So what we're going to do today is walk you through the steps on how we got from the before, right, to the after. Next slide. And you'll hear me saying next slide through this because what we're doing today, as we have a couple other people behind the scenes working for us, Danielle is helping me with the technical side of this Zoom presentation. So she's going to help click through the slides that allows me to be free to speak to you. The other thing I'll mention is the process that we're going to be talking about today. We use on projects like the one you're seeing here, and we're going to get into a lot more detail in a minute on this, where we had a kitchen, family room, dining room remodel. It's the same exact process almost no matter what size of project. Next slide, please. For example, we also use the same process on a project like this, a larger scale project, where we see a before here, okay? And then an after here. Once again, these two pictures are taken just about from the same angle, and you can see what a transformation that was. Some beautiful outdoor spaces as well on this project, and then all the way through the house, just creating a beautiful environment. So this project that you see right now is a little bit bigger than the project that we're talking about today, but it's the same exact process, just scaled up a little bit more. The same applies to new homes too. Next slide, please. Where you can see here where we had a new ground up home. We started on with just a blank lot, created this beautiful home, nice big open modern kitchen. In this case, this beautiful workshop, just such a great house. So my point being, no matter what you're thinking about doing, the same process applies, whether it's a major remodel, a kitchen remodel, new home. And even if you don't end up using Hartman-Baldwin, I think there's a lot to be learned today about how we go about this, or how you may want to go about your remodeling. Next slide, please. I want to spend a little bit of time just giving you a little bit of background as well, who we are, who I am. My name is Bill Judson. I've been with Hartman-Baldwin for over 15 years. I'm a licensed architect and a LEED accredited professional with degrees in engineering and architecture. I also grew up at a stained glass studio, the Judson Studios, down in Highland Park. And I think that's what really fostered my love of the idea of art and architecture, because stained glass is such a good metaphor for the combining of something beautiful that still needs to serve a function from an architectural point of view. And so that's, I think, what's really resonated with me, because at Hartman-Baldwin, we feel the same way, that our spaces, our living spaces especially, should be something that's beautiful and enjoyable, not just a simple shelter. Next slide, please. The other thing I want to mention is joining us on the webinar today. I mentioned Danielle, who's helping with the presentation and the slides. We also have Jesse Emmert and Carla and Christina. They are panelists on today's webinar. So I would encourage you, if you have a question during the presentation, to up in the upper part of your screen, at least on my screen, I'm using an iPad, is a Q&A. And you can click on that and enter a question. I'd encourage you to do that, and we'll have some time to answer those questions at the end, or if it's appropriate during the presentation, we'll answer that during that. But please use the Q&A to ask any questions you may have, and we'll get answers to those. There's also a chat, for those of you familiar with Zoom, that you can use as well. But if it's truly a question, let's put them in there, and we'll be able to address them. Okay, so again, one of the things I just want to briefly talk about, why do we do these workshops, and what to expect today. It's interesting, you know, we've been doing these workshops since I've been with Hartman-Baldwin, 15 years. And 15 years ago, I think we had the idea that we were going to educate the community, and that if they could learn this process, that we'd sort of raise the bar for everyone. What we were finding was that people were coming to these workshops to try and figure out how to do this. There's just so much unknown out there as how to do this, and there's really no one way to do it, frankly. But people were coming, you know, wanting to improve their homes, improve the way they live at their homes, and there were a lot of fears. There was a lot of apprehension holding them back. And so we thought, we should shift this a little bit and spend some time showing people, kind of, you know, being fully transparent. How do we do this? How do we have so many successful projects after 35 years in business? And so we started to focus on that. I also listened to people over the 15 years and started to find a lot of common fears, a lot of common questions. And so those are some of the things that we address at this workshop. So as I mentioned before, what we'll be doing is we'll be going, looking at a single project, going through on sort of a case study basis to talk about the design build process, how it works, and how it applied to the project that you're going to see today. Before we get into that, I'd like to just mention that I've found that people like yourselves that participate in these webinars, or you know, educate themselves as much as they can, have a little bit of an easier time once they decide that, hey, we're going to go ahead with this. We're going to find someone and do this, hopefully us. But they have a much easier time because they've taken this initial time to learn about how to do this, to learn about people that are out there that can do this, and to be smart about who they choose to work with. So for instance, our clients that you're going to see this project today met us years before they actually decided to do anything. And you're going to hear a little bit more about some of our other workshops and receptions, but those are great opportunities for people like yourselves and these clients to learn about us, to learn about the process, to go and see things that are new and fresh out there in the design world and the construction world, and get comfortable so that you have a better chance for success once you decide to finally dive in, okay? Next slide, please. So let's jump in here. Let's start talking about what these clients wanted to do to the home, okay? Here we have a floor plan, and just real briefly, so hopefully some of you can see what we're looking at here is things like walls, right? We have walls, we have doors and showing which way the door opens, windows, cabinets, okay? So that's what we're looking at here, just real briefly. And so what did they look at? You know, some of you are probably looking at this floor plan and going, I can tell right away that what they're looking at. We have this tiny kitchen, okay? Sometimes I call these the Ward and June Cleaver kitchens, where we could close off the kitchen from the rest of the house, right? And June could be in here in her little kitchen triangle, cooking, cleaning, and preparing the meals for the family. You know, not the way we live nowadays, right? What we've found is that the kitchens are sort of the social hubs of our homes, that not only do we need to be able to clean and cook in our kitchens, but they become the gathering places. They become not only that, you know, the housewives are kind of a thing of the past where they're not the only ones cooking. Cooking, you know, like in my family, it's kind of a fun time of the evening where we've all been out working or going to school, and we like to come together in the kitchen and maybe help prepare a meal or something like that. So all of a sudden they need to be these social centers of the homes. We also obviously need to cook and clean and prep our food in them. And, you know, they're also oftentimes, you know, circulation pads, where if we need to get outside, we oftentimes need to get out through the kitchen, out through the back door, okay? So how do we make sure that we can get the kitchen to serve all of those functions? Well, one of the things that you're seeing more and more is the idea of the open kitchen, right? So you remember the picture I showed you where we were looking at the kitchen from this point of view, where this wall blocked off the rest of the kitchen, okay? You also can tell this is what I call a one-butt kitchen, where if that old kitchen triangle here, right, we only can fit one person in here, all right? So that wasn't working for this particular family. We also, and I'll show you a picture in a minute, have the issue of where can we have a dining table, you know? The clients expressed a lot of frustration that when they wanted to have family gatherings of 8, 10, 12 people, it became a whole process of moving the couch and moving all of the furniture so they could get a dining room table in there to fit the rest of the family. And we adapt. So what had these clients, and you'll see a picture in a minute, had placed their dining room table right in this space up against these doors, which inhibited us from getting to the outside, okay? Again, we adapt. They also used the family room up in the upper right corner for their TV, okay? And to get enough distance from the TV, they had placed a chair in the doorway, all right? So how functional is that doorway with a chair in it? Not too much. So we needed to rethink this whole space. How can we make this a more functional place for a family that can enjoy a kitchen? They could have a nice big meal together. They could have a good connection of the family room to the kitchen and have a comfortable place to sit down in the evenings and watch TV. Next slide, please. So let's look at that. Here's a picture from the living room, right? You can see here on this floor plan, right, this floor plan here. This was a picture looking right to that wall separating the kitchen and the dining room. Sorry, the kitchen and the living room. You can see the little bit of the dining room here and how cramped that was. Okay, next slide. And then we have the kitchen, right? Talk about adaptation. I love this one where, okay, we're cooking in the kitchen and we all want to be together. So they placed a kitchen table right there in the middle. But you can see what I talked about, that if someone is standing here cooking, right, Someone's standing here cooking. Someone can't really be in this chair. Okay. Likewise, someone that's over here at the sink, that can't have someone sitting there. So there was a lot of shuffling around. But what does the kitchen table do, right? You can see all of us have those things, right, that we need on the counter. Coffee makers, blenders, all of that kind of thing. We have dishes when we're cleaning and prepping. And so table or an island now starts to provide not just a place for socializing, but another surface that we can work on. However, you can see that this doesn't work because now we can't walk through the kitchen, we can't have a gathering, but it was a good adaptation to get us through the time that we needed. Next slide. And here you can see the family room and the TV, and this chair, as I mentioned, okay, was sitting right in the doorway from the entry to the family room. So that inhibited even the use of that door. Next slide. So how did we get to from what you saw before to where they are now? Our design build process, basically, we've divided up into 4 parts. Each part has several steps. We have the pre-design phase, a conceptual design phase, design development, and finally construction. So let's look at the steps on those. Next slide. Yeah. So here you can see the steps of each one of those processes. And I'm going to jump in a little bit deeper on each one of these and talk about each of these steps and how that gets us closer to the goal of having that beautiful home that we just love, that we love to spend time in. Next slide. One of the things that I like to mention, because there's oftentimes a misconception about this, is that I have found when I would go out to people's homes that it was difficult to capture all of the information that we need in one visit. So I've found that we oftentimes will have 2, 3, 4 conversations before we decide, okay, yeah, this is a good fit for you, it's a good fit for us, let's take the next step. And so I mentioned all the workshops and showcases that we offer that you can learn more about us and meet more of our people. We also then, when you're ready, offer the initial consultation where myself or one of my colleagues will come out and walk around your home and spend some time with you to understand what it is you need to change about your home. And at that time too, we can talk a little bit about who we are, how we work, and sort of get a big picture idea. But oftentimes that's enough for one meeting. So we'll come back and do a second meeting, what I call programming meeting, where, okay, now that we kind of have an understanding of the big picture, let's dive a little deeper and start talking about what are the components that we need to be thinking about. So if you are, for example, thinking about a kitchen, well, let's talk about how you cook. Do you like the idea of, you know, a cooktop and a separate oven? How many ovens do we need? Are there any special things that we need? And get an understanding of how you want to use the space that we're looking at in more detail, and what are the things that we need to consider? What are the things that we need to make sure we include when we start doing some designing for you? And what that lets us do then is prepare a design proposal that says, hey, here's the steps we need to take to figure out a way to accomplish what you want, and here's how much it will cost. So the idea is before you even get into the next step, you know, okay, here's what we're going to be doing and here's how much it's going to cost. Next slide, please. Because then we're into the conceptual design phase. Now, here's an interesting thing about the conceptual design phase, and it can be sometimes challenging, is that what we're trying to do now is figure out the big picture, okay? We don't need to worry so much yet about which sink we're going to use or which faucet, unless you absolutely picked it out and you love one. But let's figure out the big picture, okay? And to do that, we need to do a couple things. One is we need to understand what we've got to work with, okay? So what do we need to do? What do we got to work with? I mentioned the programming, right? So that's where we capture all of the things that you want. I call those your parameters, right? Your personal parameters. We also need to understand what our physical parameters are. So we need to come and measure your house, understand what the structure is doing, how things are, where plumbing locations. So we have a good understanding of that. we need to spend a little time doing some jurisdictional research. So we're going to go to your jurisdiction, whether that's the county or the city. Make sure we understand what are the codes, what are the restrictions, what are their parameters for your property in particular. Then we're ready to start doing some designing, okay? And I'm going to show you some examples of that in a minute. We'll start writing a scope of work. So you'll see in a minute when we're talking about plans, that's where we can start to understand the flow of the home and the flow of the new design, what it looks like in plan. But the things like what's on the floor, what kind of windows, how many lights, all that kind of thing. Those are the things that we'll put into the scope of work so that you can understand that, hey, we've got everything accounted for, or maybe we missed something and let's put it in. But that's a chance for us to do that. And now, here's the most important part, is we'll look at preliminary estimates, okay? What does that mean is that very early on, even just maybe we've just shown you one or two design ideas, we want to get some idea of costs, okay? Because that's important information for you to decide what you want to move ahead on, okay? Because as I'm going to show you in a minute, there's always several ways to solve a problem. And we want to explore those through exploring options. And each of those options is going to be more or less disruptive and more or less costly. So we want to get some estimates as soon as possible so that you have an understanding of, hey, one, even if we're going to go ahead with anything, and two, what are some of our options and how far can we go, okay? So again, getting you the information that you need to decide how to move forward. And one of the reasons that we put this into this process of these cost estimates coming up very early is because I'm going to say, no matter what your project, what people want to do and what they want to spend are always two different things. And so when do we want to figure out that gap, right? As soon as possible. We don't want to wait until we're in construction to figure out that gap and we get change orders and cost overruns and stress levels go up and all that kind of thing. No, let's figure that out now while we're still just looking at pen and paper and able to discuss this without having your house all the way torn up. In fact, what we do even at these early stages is we guarantee these preliminary estimates to be even within 15% of your final costs, all right? So you can rely on this information and know that in fact it's good, reliable information. Next slide, please. So back to our project at hand, how did we do this? We showed you this plan, okay, where we wanted to look at, can we open the kitchen up to the living room, right? Get this good connection. We wanted a good connection here, okay? We also wanted to get some sort of dining area. And I don't think I've mentioned yet, but we also had some laundry. We have laundry in here that we need to find a space for as well, okay? So that's what they wanted to look at. Next slide, please. So what did we do? We came up with a few options. I'm going to show you in this first round of design, we had 3 options for them, okay? So here you can see a few things. What happened? One is we're taking down the wall. That's the big move here, okay? So that we can open up that living room to the kitchen, okay? What that allows, an interesting thing happens. I don't want to get too into this, but once we take out that wall, what you can start to see is now we have what I call some shared space or multiple use space, where we have an island that you can see here, and people can be sitting at this island, okay? Now, it also can serve a function of when we're entertaining in the living room, is now we can also still share that space as part of the living room. And now also it becomes a nice path to travel, right, to the outside. So by taking down that wall, we're allowing for more space to be utilized multifunctionally, okay? And I just saw a question pop up about, was that a bearing wall? Yes, it was. And one of the things that I'm going to show you is we have some options when we look at what we want to do with the bearing wall. Well, first of all, I love that question. That's a load bearing wall. Can we take that out? Well, we certainly can. We do it all the time. We just need to put something back in its place. So again, without getting into too much detail, we looked at a couple of options here. In this option, we were going to do what we called a drop beam, okay, where we would have a beam coming in where the wall was before and drop that down below the ceiling, okay, because that allows us to keep all of the framing up above and then bring a beam in to support all of that. The other thing we can do is take that beam and flush it up into the ceiling so that we have a constant ceiling throughout. Okay, a couple other things I just want to point out about this particular situation is we had this beautiful, nice, big kitchen, okay? And then we were suggesting we could incorporate the laundry down here, okay? And put it into cabinetry that would match the kitchen so that, and again, now we have that shared floor space that I was talking about, floor space that we can use for laundry that we can also use as part of our kitchen function, okay? Let's look at option 2. Next slide, please. Option 2, one of the things we wanted to think about here is, well, a few things that are different here. You can see a little bit of a different kitchen layout. We wanted to offer a solution where we had an actual laundry room, okay? So if you're doing laundry, you could close the door, not hear the noise, not worry about if you left your socks on top of the washer and dryer and someone came to visit or something, you had a space that you could just simply sort of close off, okay? We also, as I mentioned just a second ago, started to look at what does it mean to do a flush beam, this beam that we were talking about here. So in this situation, we were saying, what if we put that beam up above the ceiling? So we have to cut those joists and slide that beam up into the ceiling. There's cost implications there. So what does it look like and how much can it cost? The other thing we did up here, just a slight thing, is move the opening that was here from the TV room into the kitchen over, right? So that allows us to get this nice big bank of cabinetry on an uninterrupted wall. That's one of the challenges we have, is that oftentimes people want open kitchens, but you can imagine if we take all the walls out of your kitchen, where do we put our stuff? So we need to try and maximize that wall space. Next slide, please. And finally, option 3, where now we looked at putting, not to keep harping on it, but now all of these beams started to flush up into the ceiling. We started to have all of this open space, again, shared together. How did we do that? The laundry room got moved up to the front of the house, okay? So what I want you to understand here is that none of these solutions are exactly what they ended up with, but we want to kind of explore as many options as soon as possible, because then we can not only see how the plan can be different, but we can also look at what are the costs, okay? So we had option 1, 2, 3. Here's what each one of those costs. Each one had their different costs involved. This particular one that you're looking at happened to be the most expensive because we were opening up more of the structure. We were moving a laundry room, doing a lot more disruption. We were changing out some, where we had those doors that really were not functional. We could put a nice, beautiful bank of windows down here, get a pair of French doors coming out to the backyard, okay? So different ideas, different costs. What we want to do is get this information to you so that you have the ability to say, okay, I like this idea, I like this one. Maybe even we start to hybridize some of these ideas together. Next slide, please. We also have, some fun tools at our disposal, and I'm sure all of you by now have seen things like these computer modeling. When I was in architecture school, this was just short of rocket science. Now we see it in our everyday practice. So what can we do is we can start to look at things that are difficult for some people to understand what that means on plan. So for example, a couple of the things we're exploring here is, remember, I keep talking about this idea of a dropped beam. So what we did, this shows that dropped beam where the wall came out, okay? But then we eased it with this nice soft arch. So it didn't just look like a dropped square, like what are you hiding there? As much as start to soften, start to create some visual clues between the space that we're calling the kitchen, the space we're calling the living room, and sort of frame the view from one to the other. We also wanted to explore, what does that mean to have the laundry in the kitchen? What does that look like? So here you can see a washing machine, and then what does that look like to hide it behind the cabinetry? Couple other small things we wanted to look at is when we have an island, and in this case, we were looking at putting the cooktop on the island, how do we handle the hood? In this particular rendering, you'll see what we call an island hood, and I'm going to come back to that because we ended up going with a different solution. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Next slide, please. So we'll take another look at the computer model from the other side. Again, exploring the same things. What does that, how does that look with the beam? How does that kitchen layout look? What do you mean when you say you want you're suggesting open shelves at the island, right? What does that look like? So these are all things that we can start to convey. And then it's always fun to go back and look at how close it was. So the next slide, as we get off of the rendering, shows the actual situation. So you can see pretty close correlation there. Fun, great tools to be able to communicate with you on what our ideas are. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was sort of our first presentation to the client into conceptual design. So we came to them, and if we get a chance to work with you, I'll remind you, a little bit like feeding you with a fire hose, because we had all these 3 options. Sometimes we have more even, and all of them had different implications. So they were able to take that in and kind of digest it, given that, okay, now I can see what we can do. We can see what the costs are. And hey, by the way, you guys missed a couple of things that we want to consider, okay? And one of the things that they wanted to consider is they liked the idea of having a separate laundry room, okay, which you can see here. But it wasn't quite allowing for the amount of kitchen that we wanted, okay? So we started to look at, well, what happens if we do a little addition off the corner of the house, okay? And you can see what happens is now we could have this nice separate laundry room, okay? Nice open kitchen, okay? One of the things that started to emerge was, hey, we don't even need that doorway going from the entry to the living room, because now we've got such a nice connection from the rest of the house to get into that space. So this was what I like about this, is when we were able to show them what could be done and what the costs were, they were able to say, okay, we're feeling comfortable with this. Let's take it a step further. And in fact, we even looked at a further step. Next slide, please. Where not only maybe do we bump out for the laundry room, but what would happen if we bumped out the dining area, okay? Here you can see where the old wall was right there, okay? And what that allowed them to do now, oh my gosh, we can turn the dining table. We can easily fit 6, 8, 10, 12 people there again because of that shared space. Get the laundry room. Now the project started to reach a point where they said, okay, this is heading in the direction that we like, and we were ready to go into the next step. Next slide, please. I want to take just a minute here and point out, you know, so this was in a lot of ways the close of our conceptual design. What are the goals of the conceptual design? We want to figure out the big picture. We want to get some idea of what the design is. We want to be on the same page of the scope of work. What is it that we're doing? and give you some of that cost information. And I like to just pause here a little bit and stress that these are, architects call it deliverables, to you at this phase of the project, is that every time we met with our clients, we provided them with plans that I showed you, the scope of work, and preliminary cost information in hard copy form that they could look at, spend some time on, digest a little bit before deciding to move forward. Then we're ready to get into what we call the design development. Next slide. So in the conceptual design, like I said, we figured out the big picture. We kind of know what we're after. Now let's dive into the detail. Now let's start to develop the design, start to figure out what are the cabinets, what are the countertops, how are they fitting together, what are we going to do on the floor, how many lights, what are we going to do with that hood? Figure out all those kinds of things, and what tile are we going to work with, what lighting fixtures. And so, and we also mentioned that bearing wall. We'll need to get an engineer involved just to do some calculations to figure out what we need to replace for that bearing wall. And the end result of this process now is a very robust set of working drawings, one that we can go and get approved at the city, that has a clear picture so you understand what's going out and what's coming back, that we can go and get approvals at the city, that we can build to, and that finally we can get a final cost that we guarantee before we start construction. So what does that mean? What do we do on that? Next slide, please. So we just, here's the plan you guys are familiar looking at. We start to just develop a little bit more detail. A little thing that we see here is we start to actually list all of the things that are going to be demolished. Next slide, please. And now we start to lay out the floor plan, okay? And I'll just point out, I know you probably can't read it, but now we start to see in this scope of work, we go through room by room, talk about what's on the floor, what are the light fixtures, what's the tile, what are the appliances, what are the plumbing fixtures, everything that's going into that project. And here you can see the plan very closely to the way it ended up, okay? Where we did that bump out for the laundry room, okay? Bump out for the dining room to give them that nice big space back at that end of the house, beautiful kitchen, and again, a nice good connection between that TV room and the island. I'm going to show you some pictures of these too when we get a little bit further along. Next slide, please. And now we start, the other thing we do a lot in developing the design is now we're going to walk around your kitchen and we're going to draw every single wall, right? Because we want to start to look at, for example, what we call an elevation. How many doors and drawers are we going to put? Where are the plugs? What's the tile layout of the backsplash? In this case, we had this idea of maybe it'd be fun to have some displays in the upper cabinet. So how big is that glass that we have there? Where's the microwave? All of that good stuff, okay? And then you also start to see, we did a drawing of the island that you see here. What does that look like from that? And then we look at it from every single, what does it look like from above, from all four sides? And then we get into even more detail, okay? How does the cabinet meet the ceiling? What does that crown mold look like? How do we hide the lights that are underneath the cabinet, okay? We even look at what's the edge of the countertop look like? And even what's the distance between the top of the cabinet door to the countertop? All of those details we want to figure out. One, so that you have an understanding of what's coming back, okay? And that we have a clear understanding of what we need to build to. Next slide. Next slide is another detail where we start to look at more of the walls. What does the laundry room look at? Oh my gosh, look at all of this cabinetry, all this storage that we were able to work out into the laundry room. How does that look where the washer and dryer are? What do those new doors look like? All of these details we want to make sure everyone involved with is clear so that we have a good understanding before we come and take out your kitchen. Slide, please. And we're also ready to start looking at materials now, okay? And I know this can be a really fun part and it can seem overwhelming. I'm always shocked by the amount of decisions that go into a new kitchen or a new bathroom. And I find clients are all over the map here. Some of them have spent time and looked and picked out a lot of what they want, and others are overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start, okay? And so we're fortunate enough that not only do we have a staff of full-time architects, we also have a staff of full-time interior designers that are very well versed in taking you down this decision tree of how do we even get started to look at things. And so, for example, they may come to us and say, okay, let's look at some palettes. Do you like cool colors? Okay. Do you like warmer colors? Okay. So we'll kind of even just start at that level. What resonates with you? We'll look at the other parts of your home maybe that you like so that we can tie all that in. And then once we've got an idea of what color palette you resonates with you, we'll start to look at, okay, what tile fits in with that color palette? You may have even picked out, you went to the tile shop and found this tile. Oh my God, I don't know where we're going to use this, but I want to use this somewhere. Okay, great. That's perfect. Now we can start to look at things that will go and match and work with those things that you love. Next slide, please. So finally, we end up with these working drawings, right? Where now we've got a set that you, again, understand what the project is, what's going away, and that we're ready now to start into our pre-construction process, which is in a lot of ways we consider it part of the developed design. But now we've got the drawings ready, we can really focus on the construction part and what that means. Next slide, please. So now we're ready to go start pulling our permits, okay? We'll have a job walk where we'll have all of our subs, anybody that we want to get bids from, all of our people, carpenters, painters, everybody, and we'll climb all over the house. And we'll also start to really dive into things like, I get questions sometimes with people that have older homes. Gosh, this is a 1920s home, you know, what are you going to find structurally? What if you find damage? What's the condition of my plumbing? What's the condition of my electrical? Where here we'll have the plumber, the electrician, the heating and cooling all together. And sometimes, you know, if we're moving an air conditioner and it involves a plumber and an HVAC and an electrician, we have them all together at your house to figure all of that out. We'll also have a pre-construction meeting where we'll sit down and spend some time with you and say, okay, we're ready to start construction. Here's when we'd like to start. How are we going to be living together here? Where are you guys going to be? What time can we start? What time would you like us to finish? We're going to set up a temporary kitchen. Where can we put that? Make sure that you're comfortable with everything that's going to happen before we come and start demoing anything. And then we'll also start to prepare our final cost estimate, okay? And this is really, when we started really pursuing this business model, this was the big thing, is how do we get to, I call it a 0% error factor on our construction estimate before we start construction. No one else does this. No one else guarantees their prices. But we're saying, hey, we've designed it, we've drawn it, we've gone through and picked everything out with you. We guarantee this price, okay? So that gives you a lot of peace of mind as your kitchen, as you know, it starts to disappear. Next slide, please. Then we're into construction. In a lot of ways, construction is execution at this point. You know, we spent the time to figure out what you need. We've spent the time to figure out physically what we've got to deal with. We've figured out everything that's going into it. Now we're just going to do the construction, okay? But there's still a lot of important work to be done in construction, even beyond the technical pieces of the construction. Next slide, please. And that has to do with communication, okay? More than ever, now is the time that we need to be communicating well, because part of your house may be gone and we're in and out of there every day. So we make sure that we have a weekly meeting where every week we'll meet and we'll talk about what happened last week, what's coming up next week. Do we have any decisions to be made? we'll have a couple of very key meetings, electrical and plumbing meetings, where we'll do all of the electrical and plumbing layouts, but we want to make sure, okay, now you're standing in your shower. How high should you get the shower head, right? The last thing we want to do is design this beautiful shower and have you have to like stoop under your shower head. So where does that go? We showed an electrical switch on the left side of your door. You'd prefer it on the right side. Oh boy, we've got 6 lights in here. I think 4 would be really good. So, and we'll do the same thing with the cabinetry. The idea is if we get you and our project manager and the subcontractor that's doing the work and walk through it one final time before the work happens, then we can meet all of your expectations. We'll also have what we call a substantial completion meeting, you know, where I always love it, where the kitchen starts to come back together and people start asking every week, when can we start cooking? When can we start using it? Well, we'll reach a point where, okay, you can start using your kitchen, but there's still little things we need to do. We've got a cabinet door out of square. We've got a little scratch on the floor. There's a little fleck in the paint. And we'll make a list of all of those things and put dates to it and make sure we just check off that list so that we don't get to closing out the project until you're completely happy. And in fact, I think I shouldn't call this project closeout. I'd rather call that project celebration, because we've shown, in fact, you can look us up on a website called Guild Quality, that we're almost 100% client satisfaction, which is unheard of in construction, residential remodeling. But it's because of this process and all of these steps that we take that when we get to the end, the closeout is more like a celebration. We'll go and have dinner, pop a bottle of champagne, say, hey, we did it. Look at this beautiful result of all of this hard work. Next slide, please. So getting ready to the end, getting close to the end here, I just want to kind of take you through a walkthrough of the finished project, just because it's such a beautiful result. So the slide you're looking at here is as you walk into the entry, this is how the house presents itself. And I just love the openness, the bright airiness that was in stark contrast to the home before we got there. You can see the connection of the living room to the kitchen, and then the beautiful dining room with those big doors looking out into the view into the backyard. And then I just love the furnishings that the client has chosen, just fit so nicely into this space. Next slide, please. Here we have one of the pictures we started with. Maybe it's a little bit different context for you now. You can see the connection from the living room into the kitchen. So you can imagine when we have those situations where we've got family members, people can be sitting at the island, people can be helping cooking, they can be sitting, enjoying the fire in the living room, all while we're sharing all of that space. Next slide, please. Again, looking in towards the kitchen, one of the things I want to point out here, and we'll see it more in the next slide, is you can see a couple of photographs on this cabinet here, okay? A client came to us, and when we found out that, hey, we can't put all of those fun postcards and pictures and letters that we get from friends on our stainless steel fridge, but I still want to do that. And so we found this magnetic glass that fits on the front of the cabinet and put that in there for her. And then you can just see how informal but yet functional this kitchen really is. And then I'll point out as well, remember when I talked about that island hood that came down from the ceiling and hovered over the island like this? Well, what are some of our options there? And so what we found is this flush mounted hood where we can take a hood, it's got a nice powerful fan, and flush it up into the ceiling. So all of that openness over the island is maintained. Really nice solution. Next slide, please. There you can see that fun magnetic board. Nice little planning desk here, right? We all still need places for our iPad and place to charge our phone and put our things, maybe some photographs, all that good stuff. Really started to take nice shape. And here you start to get a little bit of a glimpse into the laundry room, and then nice view over the kitchen sink into that beautiful tree outside. Next slide, please. And then we'll turn to that planning desk again. A little bit of a close-up. Next slide, please. And here's that view into the family room, because now not only do we have nice openness to the living room, but on a day-to-day basis, when maybe it's just the two of the clients, or they have a couple of one or two of their kids over, that they can have a connection sitting, getting the meal ready, and still be able to share a common space between the family room and the TV. But yet there's enough separation that if someone wanted to watch TV and not be disturbed with someone in the kitchen or vice versa, you still have that capability. Next slide, please. A little bit closer, you can see now where we closed off that door. If you remember, we had a door right here, okay, that came from the entryway. So by closing that off, you can see we can get a very nice furniture arrangement in there, nice cozy space. Next slide. And finally, the dining room. I love this shot. I mean, this is just so beautiful, so welcoming, where we don't have to spend half a day rearranging the furniture so that we can have some friends over, but we can all be spending some beautiful time in this dining room table, looking out at the view of the backyard. Very simple, open, light, airy result, and just a fabulous, fabulous outcome. Next slide. So a little bit of a challenge. We're wrapping up here. Is that, like I remember when I started with why we do this workshop, and I'm finding that people are challenged with finding the right people to work with, finding people that are gonna take the time to understand what they want, to plan that out, to figure out all of the details, and not just figure it out as we go, because then you have to figure out the costs as you go as well. So how do we find the right people, and how do we know that they're communicating well? And I think all through the steps of those process, that's how we do it, and make sure that we end up with a result that you're happy with, that suits your lifestyle, and that, you know, maybe you say the thing that I love to hear people say is, oh my gosh, I wish I would have found you earlier, you know, because so many people live for years in their home unhappy with the way that it is, and it doesn't have to be that way. Next slide. So what is my challenge? My challenge is to help give you some sense of what can be done, okay? Because even me, you know, when I walk into my home, I kind of get stuck. So when I walk into others' homes, it's almost easier. In fact, when I'm working on my home, I have to go get some people from the office. Hey, help me understand what I can do, because I'm stuck. Because when I walk into a space and I hear what people want, and I see something like this, next slide, I can see this, okay? So how do we get there? How do we make sure that we're communicating in a way to get what you want, and that you're able to use our expertise to get that, okay? Because these are the beautiful things that I can see, and we need to make sure that we're on a path that results in something that's a great solution for you. Next slide. So what is success to us? You know, you can see it here. It's a client that's happy and in love with their home and with us. In fact, that is one of our primary drivers. One of our primary goals is for you to have a good experience during construction and be absolutely 100% happy with the outcome. And you can see pictures here. One of the things that I love is, like, I hear when people say, oh, I would have wished you sooner. Oh, I'm so happy. And then we'll have receptions, you know, where clients that we worked with 15, 12, even some 20 years ago still come, and they enjoy sharing their experiences with us, enjoy sharing experiences with other clients and prospective clients. And that is such a rewarding part of my job, is that we don't leave a path of destruction. We're leaving a path of friendships, of relationships that are ongoing, people that will refer us to their friends and family. That's really how we measure our success. Next slide, please. I want to wrap up here with a couple more things. Hopefully you've found this workshop informative and helpful and enjoyable. So what are some opportunities to get to know more about us and to maybe further your knowledge in how to get what you want? And one that we offer, if you're in our service area, are personal consultations, where myself or a colleague will come out and spend some time with you, looking at what you want, answering questions about who we are and what we do, trying to figure out if this is a good fit. Obviously, in this time of the safer at home, we're doing that more and more virtually. We also offer more workshops like the one and showcases like the one you're experiencing today, and you'll be seeing more and more of those online as well. And then when we're able, we'll be actually visiting some of the homes that we worked on, where some of our clients are happy to open up their homes to have people come in and see what we did for them and the end result. So keep an eye out for those opportunities. Next slide, please. In fact, one of those is going to be coming up very quickly, where we're going to be a home tour of the home that you see on the right there. So if you'd like to find out about this, again, since we're in the safer at home time, we're going to be doing this virtually. So make sure you follow us, whether that's on Twitter, Instagram, House, Facebook, website. Just make sure that you're connected with us, and you'll be able to see that. Next slide. I wanted to leave a little bit of time here at the end. If we have any questions. I'm sure I didn't answer all of your questions going through this. And then before I get to the questions, I just do want to mention we'd appreciate your feedback. So after this, if you don't mind, if you get an email from us, it'll be a quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. But we appreciate the feedback. So as we continue to improve on these communications and want to make it worth everybody's while. So again, I appreciate you all for spending some time. I do want to open it up to questions and see if anybody had any, or if Carla, if you noticed any coming up.
Yeah, we did. We had some great questions come up during the presentation, and great job, Bill. It's one of my favorite projects to look at. It's such a great transformation. It's really fun to kind of revisit it and see how everything kind of changed and transformed. Really, really lovely project. A couple of questions that came up were, how did you come up with this cost estimate for this project? And they had a little bit more questions about the cost estimation part of how we arrive at that for the client.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something that required a lot of focus as we were developing this process, and still requires a lot of focus. And really what it comes down to is a couple of things. One is when I showed you at the beginning the option 1, 2, and 3, a big part of it is having a plan. I get lots of questions, and it's a fair question. It's the right question. It just may not be the right time after spending an hour or so with someone in their kitchen. Okay, how much? Well, I don't know yet. I don't know what we're doing, So it's difficult. So having a plan that you can hand to an estimator, and that's the second key component, is someone that's able to think about the project in totality, okay? Not just, oh, well, I think, a kitchen remodel is this, but able to look at it in totality and understand, okay, well, how much demolition do I have? All right, how much framing do I have? How much flooring? How much cabinetry? And the only way to get to that accuracy is to have that plan and be looking at it and being able to, what we call, do takeoffs on all of that. And we have that's an advantage of being a design build firm, is that the same estimator that's doing those very preliminary estimates is also doing those final estimates. So he's on the phone constantly with material suppliers and subcontractors and our own people. So he's up to date with the understanding of what costs are. But those are the real two key things, is having a plan that we can refer to, and then having an estimator that's got that knowledge base that can pull all that together and look at the project, not just something, more random, your project specifically. Thank you. That's a good question.
Yeah, that was a really good one. Another one that came up that is obviously really pertinent to us right now with the stay-at-home order and the precautions that everyone's taking right now is, how are we working through this quarantine time? How does this impact projects if people do want to start on their project?
Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe should have mentioned that earlier. I mean, again, I'll say that's one of the advantages of a design build firm as well, is that, all of our architects and interior designers and estimators are working from home. And in this wonderful day and age, we're able to do all of that remotely. All of our drafting and drawing and designing is all done on the computer. So we're able to work remotely. And one thing that some people don't realize is that in a project like this, it takes several months in designs, in designing and selections and everything before we start construction. So for example, if you were ready to start, now, we could work through the design and get everything ready, because it would still be several months before we'd be into construction. And then as in regarding construction during the Safer at Home, what we're doing is we do have some projects that the homeowner is not in the home. And so we are continuing to build on those projects very safely, one subcontractor at a time. We're limiting the amount of people on the job site. But any of the projects where we're sharing spaces with the homeowner, they're still in the home. We've shuttered for now. We've buttoned it up, got it safe to where they can be safe and we can be safe, and they can use the home as best as possible. And the other thing I'll mention too is, some of the cities, well, actually all of the cities, all of the jurisdictions that we work on, very quickly we're able to get plan and permit submittals online, and they're able to issue permits. So frankly, I feel like the cities and counties are working a little bit quicker now. Maybe they're not as distracted. So we can still make some progress on your project during this time while still being safe.
Yeah, that was that's always, I think, an important thing that's on people's minds. We're still living in our homes. We're still wondering how we can improve our home and how can we get going on something with considering everything that's going on. So that's good to know. Another question came in. They're talking about, do we have a minimum size or cost for a project that we're looking for, or do we just do the design? That's something that someone was curious about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll talk about the minimum size project. We don't have a hard and fast rule about a minimum size project, but I do counsel people on, just given the nature of our business and sort of the firepower that we bring to projects, sometimes you may not need us. What we're able to do is we're efficient, we're best on projects that require a lot of coordination, like the project we just went through, where we needed engineering. There was going to be removal of walls and framing and flooring and carpentry and cabinetry and all that kind of thing. So that's where it really makes sense to use someone like us. Sometimes when I go to a home and someone wants to remodel their bathroom, and the remodel is, well, I just want to take out the old, or maybe I want to take out everything except for the cabinet or everything except for the shower. You may not need us for that. It may not be the best use for either of us. So it's generally on a case-by-case basis. And regards to plans, do we do plans only? The way I look at it is, we talked about that conceptual design, design development, construction. Each one of those are pretty independent steps. We can do a conceptual design for you, and then some people decide, hey, we just decided not to do this, or they can take that information and use it in another way. Similarly with design development. Obviously, our goal, we did this whole process is to take you from stem to stern and give you a good experience and give you what you want. That's our goal. That's what we would like. But certainly there's some pretty distinct steps that if you would like to take that information and move on, that's always a possibility.
Great. And then another question, more specific to this project, is the duration of the project. How long was this? I know there was a couple of, when you went back and showed us the different options, and then the revisions, and then of course construction. Do you remember the timeline kind of associated with this project?
I can't remember specific to this project, and every project's different. Some people, in fact, most people that I meet with, they think they're going to go quick in design and everything, but I find that they do take some time to really make these decisions because they're important ones. So I do track this, though. I do have a pretty good understanding. Typically we'll see a conceptual design phase last somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks. Design development, depending on a project, can be 2 or 3 months, and then we usually allow about a month to a month and a half to get into construction. Typically, and I know people are oftentimes shocked and they say, how can it take so long? And I'd be happy to talk to you more about it. But typically we just see these things take, 5, 6, 7 months in design and pre-design before we're actually starting construction. And then a project like you're looking at today is probably between a 4 and 6 month project by the time we're redoing all of the kitchen and opening everything up and doing the addition, all of that good stuff. So, this can start to get close to a year in a lot of cases.
And kind of along those lines, someone was asking about, in terms of planning, better cost planning for projects, is there a percentage total cost for the planning phase that they should maybe consider when trying to think about establishing a budget?
Another good question. Again, something that I do track, and when I call them soft costs. So when we think about architecture, the design, the interior design, engineering if we need it, permits, all of those soft costs that we need to spend that aren't going to be left behind in your project, those will typically be about 12 to 15% of the cost of construction. So if you're thinking, okay, my cost of construction, just to use loose numbers, is $100,000, well, then we may be looking at design costs of 12 to 15,000 on top of that. Always, I'll mention this too, for us, that's always done on an individual basis as well. Each step of the process, I talked about how we get to doing a design proposal for the conceptual design. So before we start that piece, you know exactly what that's going to cost. Likewise, before we start the design development process, we give you a fixed fee for that. So you know exactly what that piece of the process is going to cost. And then we talk about the cost of construction. And I mentioned how we get to the guaranteed price on the construction before we start that. So we're very big on making sure each step of the way, you know what you're going to get and you know exactly what it's going to cost. So no open-ended agreements with us.
Thanks, Bill. Looks like we have pretty much answered all of the questions that came up. And you mentioned earlier, how we measure our own success, and certainly those relationships are what's key for us. And it's just fun to just give you an idea. We had a good number of past clients show up this morning to just share and check out this project. And so whether in person or virtual, it still resonates today. We still have a bunch of nice past friends here on our attendee list. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, that's really fun. So as far as questions go, we're all good here. If anybody has any last minute question, feel free to pop it in. And let's see, it looks like maybe.
Yeah, or feel free to reach out to us as well. Be happy to do that. I know I've gotten off past our allotted hour, so I'd like to wrap it up. And again, if you do have any questions, search through, or I'm sorry, not search, get onto the website. We have contact information there, Instagram, all of those types of things. So we're very big on getting you the information you need every step of the way so that it's a comfortable and as pleasant as it can be experience for you. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up. Thank you all for spending a little bit of your Saturday morning with us. You can get up and stretch your legs and maybe get another cup of coffee or cup of tea, get on with the rest of your day. But stay safe. I'm looking forward, hopefully, to seeing, meeting, talking to each one of you in the future. And thanks again, and have a good rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.